Thank you, Ali. Shall I begin?
Yes, please do.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Gerald Mills. I'm speaking to you from UCD. I'm in the map room of UCD. I guess that's slightly relevant because fundamentally this project has been about finding out about the green spaces of Dublin. The project was called Mapping Green Dublin and was run by UCD Geography in collaboration with Common Ground and Connect the Dots. And the idea was that we would try to find out about what the nature of the green infrastructure was in Dublin. We're unlucky in some respects that COVID happened in the middle. We're lucky in other respects, I think, that people finally became aware of just how important having green spaces close to where you live is. Now, there'll be people talking over the course of the next hour and 15 minutes about different aspects of the project. So let me just give you a very, very broad overview of the project, what it was trying to do. The project was fundamentally funded by the Environmental Protection Agency, and the proposal that we submitted to the EPA was that we would do a survey of the green infrastructure of Dublin. But that sounds like an engineering term, but it's how they refer to trees, grass, any vegetative area within the city, be it private or public, and also the blue spaces of the city. So what we said we'd do is we would undertake to map the green infrastructure of the entire city. Now, you might think this is a bit surprising. We do know where all the parks are, but we've no idea where all the trees are. So one thing we discovered is that there are about 300,000 trees across the city of Dublin, that about half those trees sit inside parks and private gardens, and a substantial bulk of the remainder sit on streets. So our idea was to try and find out as much as possible about the tree coverage and to identify clear gaps. What made this project different from many other projects is that it was not supposed to be a closed environmental survey, which is what I do, but it was supposed to connect to finding out not only what the city had, but what the city could have. And in order for us to accomplish that, we simply could not have done it without engaging with a community group. That was the Common Ground organization, which means that we centered much of our work, our engagement with the community in Dublin 8. And I can speak for myself as a physical geographer who's interested in mapping and mapping trees, and I've been doing it for the last 20 years or so, is that what really makes this project different is the level of engagement of the community in designing the types of spaces that they want in this part of the city. Dublin city centre in general is not well served by having green spaces. Now, there's different levels of greening in different parts of the city, but it's not generally well served. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, given that it's a city centre, given that there's many, many people competing for that space, how can we engage the community to design a better place for everybody? That's what the project was about. So it was about mapping and understanding, it was about engagement, and then fundamentally, it's about action. So everything we've been doing in this project has been leading toward this end. The EPA report has been complete. It's a relatively, I have to say myself, because I wrote it, it's a relatively turgid report describing what we actually did. But in addition to that, we generated an action plan. And the action plan was very much about toolkits that allow communities to actually engage with Dublin City Council, private organizations, or whatever, to try and improve their communities by greening. Over the next hour and 15 minutes, you'll hear various people speaking about the project from different perspectives. And that's the important thing to point out. There is not a single view of this project. So for example, when the first people are going to speak is Niamh Moore-Cherry, a colleague of mine, who'll give an overview of the project itself and how it was organized. Then we'll talk to participants. So we're going to talk to people who've experienced in Dolphin House, in Turvey Park, and Robert Emmet Centre. So these are people on the ground who can see the benefits of green spaces for the communities in which they live. We have Anja Murray, who also worked on the project and was actually the key person that linked together all the different components, who's going to provide us or tell us about the toolkits that we developed. We have a respondent coming in who's a local, but she's also a broadcaster who's going to respond to the information, and then we're going to finish up by having a panel discussion. Now, you're only going to hear from a few people today, but there are actually lots and lots of people involved in this project. There's a few people I should mention. Obviously in Common Ground, Siobhan you'll hear later, Shodine you'll hear later. You won't hear from Naomi Murphy from Connect the Dots, who made much of the linkages possible for us. You won't hear from Owen O'Mahony. One of Matney helped Shodin in particular with some of the mapping exercises. Jason Sheridan provided photographs of all the events that we had organised. There are a couple of people who work with me closely, Tina Ningle and Robin Ferguson, both of whom spent a great deal of time in the community doing actual hard work of mapping. And Tina is interesting because he's from Papua New Guinea, and for the last 15 years, he's been mapping trees in Dublin and looking at their potential. The last person I mentioned is a colleague of ours, Ronan Foley, who's based in Maynooth, and he actually took on part of the project that we did in Dublin 8 to look specifically at the opportunities afforded by river systems like the Comock that are completely broken apart, so it's very, very difficult to make passage along them. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to pass you on to my colleague, Anja Murray, and she'll give a high-level overview of the event.
That's great, Gerald. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. It's great to see so many people here this evening, so many people that we've met before, but also new people, new faces, and it's great to have the opportunity to share this project with you. So as Gerald said, Mapping Green Dublin is a project funded by the EPA, and the key partners were UCD School of Geography, the Common Ground, and Connect the Dots. And what I'm going to talk to you about very briefly is an overview of the project itself to give you a flavour of it. Some of you who've been at events before may have heard some of this before, but what we'd really like to focus in on is how this project was a community-led greening strategy and what's being created now for the community to take forward. So this was a collaborative action research project. While UCD School of Geography and the various partners led the project, this was very much a project that was grounded in the community. And we hope that the purpose of this event is to actually bring back your ideas to you, having put them into this community strategy. The project was undertaken across Dublin 8 from March 2019 to March 2021. And what we wanted to do here was to clearly identify not just greening deficits within the area, but also existing community assets and strengths, and to come up with practical suggestions and ideas about interventions that could be made in space to enhance the quality of life and well-being in the area based on what the community representatives and all of those who participated shared with us during the course of the project. As Gerald alluded to in his introductory statement, the project was divided into 3 stages. The first was data mapping, where we took scientific data and knowledge and we mapped it within this area. The second was co-creation, where we spent over a year, and Alma was critical to this, over a year embedded within the community, running a series of events and engagements, trying to get people to come up with ideas, to share ideas, and for us to be able to take those and work them into a strategic document. And the final phase was the action phase. And that's a phase that we really see as not finishing, although the project is formally completed at this stage, but it's an opportunity for the community to take some of the outcomes of the project, including the establishment of a greening forum and the action plan that comes from this strategy, and to be able to take projects forward within the community in the longer term. So just a brief introduction to each of those 3 stages, just to provide some context for our later discussions. The first stage was the mapping stage. And what we did was we mapped the green infrastructure across the city of Dublin, things like looking at the tree canopy cover. And what we see here in this map, for example, which shows the city centre, is that Dublin has fairly low tree canopy cover compared to city centres in other places. And the table that you have there shows the sort of percentage of tree cover in Dublin. It's about 4.5% compared to cities like Copenhagen, which have 11.5%, Lisbon 12.5%, and so on. So the purpose of doing something like this is to look at the city as a whole in the context of other places. And then we want to hone down in particular into particular neighbourhoods. So as we can see here, this image shows very clearly the sort of lack of tree cover in parts of Dublin city. And what this project was trying to do was to get community ideas about how we might go about greening our city, because a lot of the academic and scientific work that has been done shows us that greening is really, really important to mental health within urban environments, to physical health, and to overall well-being. So really it's from this point that the project began. As I said earlier, the idea was to create a tree inventory for Dublin City, and this very much drew on the work that Gerald has been doing for many years with colleagues like Tina. And what we then did was we focused in on a particular neighbourhood, and given who our partners on this project were, Common Ground and their focus within the Dublin 8 area, we focused in on a part of the city in the southwest, the Kilmainham, Inchicore, Dolphin's Barn, the broad Dublin 8 area that you can see outlined here in the black shading, just to locate ourselves. But I'm sure many people on this call are from the area, so you know the area well. What was possible because of the data that was available, and it was really the first 6 months of the project that focused on mapping various aspects of green infrastructure across Dublin, and Gerald and Tina really took the lead on this, was trying to look at the density of trees across Dublin. And the purpose of doing that was then to be able to calculate, well, you know, how much pollution is being caused across the city, which neighborhoods are best placed, if you like, to be able to absorb those kinds of stressors in the urban environment. So what you see here is a map of relative tree density across the city. Where it's red, that's very low tree density. So no surprise, Bull Island pops out there. That's a sandy coastal environment, very few trees there. Also in parts of the city centre. And then the very dark green is very high areas of tree density. And you can see the sort of the southeast, the typical leafy suburbs popping out there in terms of high levels of tree density. But the area that we're interested in, you can see has sort of a low or below average tree density. And that made this a really interesting environment to be working in. One of the important things to know when you're trying to estimate the sort of impact of trees in the environment is, well, what kind of trees are they? Because not all trees are equal. So some trees perform much better in terms of capturing carbon and really improving the urban environment. So as part of the project, and one of Gerald's students worked with them on this, on mapping the tree types within the Dublin 8 area. And we also got people involved through the use of the Curio app, where they could actually tag a tree through this app and describe it, and we could try and figure out what kinds of trees were in what part of our study area. So this was very much about citizen science, about people being involved in all aspects of the project to try and generate this knowledge that's really important about our city. And so doing that, we're able to then come up with a map like this, which looks very technical. But essentially what's happened here is there's been a grid overlaid on the city. And you can look at the city as a whole and try and see, well, how much carbon is being captured in particular parts of the city. And what is the amount of CO2 that's being produced in various parts of the city. So what we can then do is we can identify areas with low trees and also with very high levels of CO2 from traffic flows and so on. And that's the kind of data we were sharing with the community as we were moving through. So a lot of scientific data, a lot of mapping was undertaken. Some of the data was data that the UCD School of Geography was producing. Other data was data that the community were looking for, additional data to try and understand their environment better. And all of that data then fed into the next phase of the project, which was the co-creation phase. And this phase lasted for about 12 months, from about September 2019 through to November 2020. I have to think what year we're in because COVID makes us feel like we've all lost a year. So what did we do as part of that co-creation phase? Well, essentially, we had some focus groups to begin with, where people were asked to map out the strengths of the area, the deficits of the area. So, for example, the National War Memorial Garden was seen as an area with strengths that could be developed. Other areas were seen as areas where there was a deficit of green space, or they were corridors where there was a lot of traffic and not a lot of greening. So kind of lower quality urban environments. And then we took some of the suggestions from these consultations and fed them into other events that happened later. So for example, in March 2020, some of you may have attended the Open Community Launch event that we had. And what we did was have a series of exercises where people were asked to map out the opportunities, deficits and strengths of the area. And we had a series of stickers that people put down on maps things to do with green space, trees, biodiversity, walking, and so on. So you can see this is the kind of the overall community response to opportunities, strengths, and deficits within the area. So very clearly, there are lots of opportunities. They're the yellow stickers that people were saying, you know, there's lots of scope to do interesting things in this area. Quite a lot of deficits in terms of things like safe walking routes to school and so on, safe cycling routes, but also some strengths in terms of existing green space and existing parts of the area that could be built up and could be drawn on as exemplars. And during COVID, of course, we had to change how we were actually doing our engagement with the communities. And the Plots project was devised by Shodine O'Sullivan, who was one of the partners, where we took advantage of the kind of mobility limitations, and we were able to map our cycle routes to school. So Shodine devised a toolkit to enable people to do this. And then they could walk through the area, they could map their walk, the best part of their walk, the worst part of their walk, and it gave us a sense of these particular environments. And all of this engagement led us towards this action for implementation. And essentially, this was the final phase of the project, where we took all of the knowledge, the scientific knowledge, all of the ideas generated by the co-creation. And one of the key aspects of the action phase was the establishment of a neighbourhood greening forum. So about 35 people signed up at our community launch for this. About 12 people have been really active in the forum. And what you see here on the screen is some of the projects that have emerged from that forum. And we're going to hear from Mary and Julie in just a couple of minutes, who are in Turvey Park. And that's one of the projects that emerged from the co-creation and from the neighbourhood greening forum phase. We also took some of the suggestions to policymakers and practitioners, because obviously there's a context within which this development has to take place. And we got some really good feedback and interesting feedback from policymakers about how we might action some of these ideas and what the barriers might be and the kinds of things that needed to be put in place. So better communication, different kinds of resources, thinking about green space in a multifunctional way, and thinking about green space as community and social infrastructure was something that was really important. And from this, from our scientific expertise, from our co-creation, and from these policy and practitioner responses, we came up with a set of actions towards implementation, towards realizing the ambitions of the community in this area. And these are the core of our community greening strategy. And you can read a lot more about them in the strategy, which is an open access document. But some of the suggestions include sustaining the neighbourhood greening forum, thinking about potential of regeneration in the housing complexes in terms of green space, and thinking of ways of developing greening indicators so communities can actually keep an eye on their community and how it's evolving over time. So I am going to hand over now to some of the people who were deeply involved in this, who were really going to be the people who will take this and make this document that we've produced a living thing through their project within the communities. So Ali, I'm going to hand back to you now to introduce our panelists.
Great, thank you so much, Niamh. Okay, so as Niamh was saying, we've got 4 different members of the local project going to share with you from different things that have been happening. And the first is I would like to introduce Debbie Mulhall. So maybe familiar to many of you, Debbie Mulhall is a community development worker for 10 years and Dolphin House resident since childhood. So Debbie, I know that you're an absolute expert to speak to us about what's been happening in your area. And I'm going to bring up, we had one little bit of visual support we wanted to share to bring to life what you're going to be sharing. So I'll just bring that up now as well. And there we are, and I'll just take myself down. So over to you, Debbie.
Yeah, Grant. Well, that was obviously me planting a tree in 2019. And the other photograph that you're looking at there is the proposed development site for regeneration for Dolphin House. Because as some people may know, we are in the process of regeneration in Dolphin House. So these are the new proposed plans. So we're looking at this as a community. Yeah. So I suppose for me, it's green areas are really important. And I suppose obviously, because as I said, I'm third generation of 5 generations in my family. And my father, who, when I look back on it now, was ahead of his time, because I remember him saying to me, when we were quite young, about, recycling, upcycling, all that sort of stuff. And even when we were children, planting tomatoes in a window box in our bedroom. And of course, we had 8 children, so they only ever got to cherry tomatoes, because we never let them grow any further. We were just so excited that we made them and we ate them. But I suppose green spaces has always been here. We had 5 really big fields from when they were built in the 50s. So those fields that we had, although they were just a field, they were more than just a field to us, because they were spaces for us to actually sit out. We'd have picnics in the summer, in the winter you could go out and sit in the snow, all that sort of stuff that we did. But again, my father used to bring us on nature walks every Sunday to feed the ducks at the canal. And for us, going up there and seeing the green, and my father would tell us which trees was which, and acorn and oak, all that sort of stuff. So we were getting to learn bits and pieces. And as I said, the photograph that you've just seen there, for me that day, I wasn't just planting a tree. It was like, obviously my father has passed, he's 16 years past now, and I know he was there with me that day. I just had the feeling that, and I know he would have been proud of us, actually, because he'd always said he'd love more trees, in the vicinity. And for me, just planting that tree that day, I just felt like he's looking at us now, and he knows that we're doing something for the environment, to make this environment better. And it's not just for people that's living today. It's for now, as I said, I have grandchildren and my great grandchildren. That's what we want. We want to have green spaces for them. But the tree that I actually planted that day, for me, it was more than just going out and planting a tree. At the time, you may have noticed, I was going through cancer treatment at that time. So I look at that tree now from my bedroom window, and I go, that tree is going strong, and so am I. So it's more than just a tree. It's very emotional for me looking at it, and I'm going, it's blooming and it's blossoming and it's great. And then we also have apple trees and pear trees. And these are things that, as children, we would have to go and steal from an orchard. We used to call them rob the orchards when we were kids. But I mean, to actually have them in your own garden is just amazing. And that idea of robbing the orchard is gone now, because they're there in our doorstep. So we actually wait till they bloom. And again, it's another thing. You look at these trees growing every year, and the fruits growing on these trees, and they're growing really big, good size, apples and pears. And not only are they nice to look at, my pal made me an apple crumble out of it last year. So they're nice to look at, and they're also nice to eat. But the actual fact of having fruit trees in your own back garden is just amazing, I just think that, obviously, as I said, we're going through regeneration. And, lots of people say, oh, you're going to lose some spaces. And we know that, it's I think that's it's a given that you're going to lose spaces. But I would prefer not to lose our green spaces. I would love to keep our green spaces for our environment. And also, as we said, it's just, this year has been hard on everybody, with the pandemic. And I think the only place that you felt you were okay to go was to a near garden, to get fresh air, and, that hug a tree. Well, I would have gladly hugged a tree, because I was like getting out and seeing nature at its best, I also look at the men's shed that we have here. And again, around mental health. They do stuff every day of the week, they do planters, they've been planting trees. And again, for their mental health, and even people looking at that, it's so valuable, and it's very important for us as a community to be able to support that project as well, the men's shed project. But I look out now at the canal, because I'm in one of the regeneration. I've got one of the new apartments, And I look out and I look in my piece of garden and I look at the trees and the flowers. And at the moment, we have a lot of wildflowers growing. They are lovely to look at. And then I look at the canal and I go, yeah, there's lovely trees there, but there could be a lot more. And I know it's very easy to plant a tree. Do you know what I mean? But it's looking at that and nurturing it from its early stages. And there's not much work that has to be done on them. And I think that's the good thing, because people say, oh, well, why would I do something like that? I have to do so much work on it. But you don't actually have to do a lot of work when you plant a tree. It's just about looking at it, watching it growing, and realizing that it's there for the environment. It's there for my generation. It's there for the next generation and the following generations, So I think that's very important. I don't know what else to tell you. I probably rambled on a bit, but I suppose I just think it's great to be part of this project, because, again, it's just nobody really talks about these sort of things. And I mean, I know even with us here in Dolphin House, we're so, stuck on, getting regeneration happening, and we do, of course, we want regeneration to happen, but we also want to have green spaces for our residents. And there's another lovely area over in Dolphin Park where the senior citizens live now. And they have a beautiful little area. And again, they're the same, to be able to sit on their balcony and look out at greenery. And it was one of the things they kept asking for when they knew they were going to be regenerated. Are we going to have green spaces? Are we going to have trees? Are we going to have plants? And to be able to look at them and say, they have them now, and that's what they wanted. And they wanted them for their children and grandchildren to look at as well. So that's me done.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you for those powerful words. And I really feel, since our different conversations around this, the way you bring to life what you see when you look out of your window, and go right back to the story about your father. So thank you. So let's continue in that vein. I'll bring in the next of our colleagues on local projects. So these are two people some of you may have met if you were here at the early stages as we arrived. So let me just find you both so I can bring you up on the big screen. There they are. Okay, so I think maybe the image will speak for itself. I'll just invite you both to come off mute as well. So we have Mary and Julie in Turvey Park, and maybe I'll leave the both of you to introduce more about who you are and why you are there. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ali. And thank you, Debbie. That was just really special. And we loved listening to your story. It was amazing. Yeah, thanks for inviting us. It's a privilege to be part of the event. We can't quite believe we're here in Turvey, so welcome to Turvey Park. I hope you can get a wee bit of a view there behind us. It's a gorgeous evening. So just to give you background on the project, it kicked off probably about 9 months ago, September 2020. And what initiated was I had come down with my young son, Cal, he was 6 years old at the time. And the river Campbell flows through the park. So we'd made a few little boats at home, and we said, I haven't been down here in a while, so we said we'd come down. And he just didn't want to leave. But on the other hand, it was quite a hostile environment. So as a parent, I was wanting to leave, but he wanted to stay. So meanwhile, Mary had hooked up with Mac and Green. And she really wanted to create a space of well-being, and I had left the park saying I really want to do something about this, but I felt powerless on my own. So we came together, and it was actually on this picnic blanket we set it out amongst the debris, you could say, in the park, and we sat down and we decided our plan and what we'd like to do. So the first thing we did was contact the head of Dublin City Parks, and they were really encouraging, and they gave us permission to just start on the ground. So that involved a big cleanup, and that took a good few months. And we had a wonderful park foreman who came on board, and he was great with the big things like getting the JCB in and getting the pitch resurfaced. Getting the pitch resurfaced has been just so wonderful for really bringing everybody together. It's the centerpiece of the park, you could say, and it's constantly in use. So currently the park is now up and running. It's no longer an antisocial space. It's up and running. We have all kinds of activities here, including a ballet class, which was our first official event at the park, and that was a great success. But we have rollerblading on the page, football, you name it. There's quite a multicultural neighborhood here, so it's wonderful. You see ball games, and we can't even identify what they are, but they look like so much fun. But there has been so much in the experience, but I would say that I could see that when you change a landscape, you really change the atmosphere. And so immediately as the landscape of the park started to change, the atmosphere began to change. More and more people became interested, and just the love and care, I think, started to grow. And it really became very much an organic thing where all the people who came in regularly, we have a lot of residents who are in apartments which are backing onto the park, and it almost became like that, their back garden. And they just started to show such love and care towards it that what initially was a lot of hard work, especially with the litter and everything, got less and less as time went on, because people were treating it like their own garden, and then the gardening started. And you know, as with any kind of public space, there's definitely a lot of challenges, but we always kept the vision in sight that we want to create a really beautiful garden, and hopefully in years to come it will become a destination for people. And we really believe that the children being involved here, that's something that they will take into adulthood. And there's so many young gardeners here, and they're so keen, and perhaps they wouldn't have the chance to you know, visit the gardens that a lot of people have access to. So we want them and us to create a really beautiful place. We believe it can be done. And yes, it's a real learning curve. There's so much that there are so many mistakes, of course, you make, and you realize your strengths and your weaknesses. But the more people that come on board, they fill all of those gaps. And so the volunteering side has really been productive. And we know that we have a lot of goodwill in Dublin City Council too, and that has been great for us. So I'm going to hand you over to Mary, and she's going to talk a wee bit more.
Thanks very much, Judy. That was all very well said. Well, look at us two sitting here. Aren't we very privileged? The wind in the hair, sun on our back, and a little piece of lavender in tow. Wish you could all get the lovely wap from this. What Julie and I want to do is that if you could imagine coming into our first beautiful well-being garden that we've established here. We call it our Mediterranean inspired sensory garden, and lavender is just one of the plants that's sitting around us here right now. We have lovely lemon balm, mint, thyme, all these lovely gorgeous aromatic smells wafting around us. So hopefully you can all come down and experience the sensory garden for yourselves. Just getting back to what Judy said at the beginning, when I did the outdoor workshop on the 15th of August with Mapping Green, I was trying to impress on everybody at the time that I'd like to kind of kickstart, you know, kind of a sensory wellbeing garden in Dublin 8. But when I left the meeting, I just thought, my goodness, where am I going to start? Where am I going to find this underutilized green space? And I had the good fortune of meeting Judy that evening, and I was nearly crying, going, how am I going to start? And Judy goes, I have it, Turvey Park. It needs love, care, and attention, and regeneration. So here we are 9 months later, sitting in our beautiful sensory garden. Now, I don't know if you can sneak a peek there behind me. I'll just move over a little bit. We're very fortunate to walk into Turvey and discover we have established trees, lime trees, we have willow trees, ash trees, there's a sycamore over in the corner. So we're blessed already with having the well-established mature trees here in Turvey as an anchor. So beyond that, then you can see this beautiful green space, which is well utilized for picnics and for kids running around. Much of what Debbie was describing, you know, having that open green space, that feeling of having a field to run around and have the freedom. I know the minutes now are, but just an important point Julie and I really want to point out is that a lot of the residents, dwellers on the perimeter of Turvey Park are living, you know, in small apartments. And as Julie already pointed out, I'm repeating myself now, but they now use Turvey as their front garden, where they come down the steps, plant their seeds, watch whatever seed they grow germinate and blossom. And it's become the garden that they just didn't have access to before this, because as Julie said, it was an antisocial no-go place. And, you know, that despair of looking out the window and feeling, you know, here's this wonderful underutilized green space that we really like to get our hands on. So Julie and I like to think we've had a good hand in unlocking that space for people. So much more to say. We're in a fortunate position of Turvey's in a south-facing aspect with the beautiful, I don't know if you can hear in the background, the lovely flow of the Campbell River on the north side of the park. It all adds to the beautiful well-being sensory feeling that we're experiencing right now. So we feel you just going to have to come down to the park yourselves. We're always looking for new volunteers. Even if you 15, 20 minutes a week, come down, join us, do maybe a little bit of therapeutic weed pulling, but make sure to bring your fun with you and your picnic and your food, and just join in the fun here, the fun atmosphere that we want to create. And that's going forwards. Yeah, it's all about having fun here in Turvey. A lot more stories to tell, but that's all for another day.
Wow. Thank you, Mary and Julie. I think, well, I could just say, I hope on behalf of all of us that just thank you for not only telling your own personal story and the story of how a place changed actually from something maybe quite negative, sad to look at, to something that was really like a huge benefit, what anyone would wish to have as their front garden. And I think in terms of whether we could pick up the environment, the sensory aspect, we definitely can. I mean, the bird was almost drowning you out, Mary. It's just like, I feel like we're all wanting to go and visit Turvey Park right now.
Yeah, please do, and pick some lavender and take it home with you.
So thank you so much to both of you for all of your work and for evoking that so richly.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie.
Okay, so we're moving on. This is just so the third speaker in our local projects. I will just bring him up now to join me. There we are. Yes, so I'm really pleased to introduce Austin Campbell. So Austin is the project coordinator at the Robert Emmet CDP. So that's a community development project which is beside Oliver Bond Flats. And so he's going to tell us about some of the community-led environmental projects that they are currently involved with there. And Robert, Austin, shall I just share the flyer that we prepared as well?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't provide you with a better image.
No, well, I think this is going to kick off what you're going to share perfectly. So here we are, and over to you, Austin.
Great, so thanks, Ali, for the introduction. Well done on everyone from UCD School of Geography for delivering such a good launch to a very important study, and lovely to hear from Debbie and Mary and Julie. I loved Debbie's description of watching a tree grow, and then I loved everything about Mary and Julie's presentation in the park with the lavender and the birds. So I hope you don't mind. I'm going to begin by kind of giving a rationale for the different environmental projects that Robert Emmet CDP are involved with before I describe the actual projects themselves, because I think it's important to have context. So we operate in a community that is especially underserved in terms of appropriate environmental resources. In Dublin 8, there's, I think, under 1 metre squared of green space per person, compared to 49 metres squared in the larger Dublin area. And there's very few play facilities, sporting facilities, or trees, especially in our neck of Dublin 8. And there's a very high concentration of traffic in spite of the local population having very low levels of car ownership. So there's all of the negative kind of mental health and general health outcomes that you'd expect in a population that are served so poorly by green resources. And I think green and blue resources are particularly needed in Dublin 8, especially around the Liberties area, where there's such a high proportion of people living in flats and apartments in the immediate vicinity of Robert Emmet CDP. I think about 90% of the population live in flats in Oliver Bond House, 2-bedroom flats are 48 meters squared, you know, so it's particularly important that there are appropriate green resources in the area. So that's the context that we deliver our environmental projects in. And I guess that's the reason why we put so much effort into trying to deliver collaborative projects that are fun, create a fluency around environmental rights, as well as having an actual positive environmental impact. So I'll tell you about the projects that we're involved in. So the first project I'll tell you about, there's a few of them, so I'll just sum up maybe 3 of them, is Urban Grit, which we're delivering in collaboration with UCD School of Geography, and it trains community members how to use a simple mapping software and contribute to a community-led open source map of green resources in Dublin 8. So we're working with Alma and Owen, who are on the call today, and I think there might be a couple of attendees on the call as well. So the aim of the project is to create a fluency around rights, teach some simple tech skills, and generate useful data that builds a case for more appropriate provision of green spaces and resources in Dublin 8. Our Bridgefoot Street Community Garden and Oliver Bond House garden projects support local community members, secure a transfer of responsibilities from Dublin City Council to design and manage a portion of land as a community garden resource. So we've been working with Deirdre Prince in DCC Parks to establish a committee made up of community members to source funding and to facilitate delivery of garden design training for community members. So we're working with the Education and Training Board to access that. And we've also recently started a similar project with the Marshalsea Barracks site. So Dublin City Council have been willing to provide access to the Marshalsea Barracks site, and we're working with the Irish Architecture Foundation and a design group made up of local community members to also transform that space. So, you know, with each of those projects, I could speak for ages, so I'm just going to say a few words about them and leave them at that. But last but not least, our good news story, our kind of fun project, because they're a little bit, you know, they're a little bit data heavy and everything else, is our inner city beekeeping project. So it's a socially and environmentally sustainable project that employs local community members to manage 24 beehives across, I think it's around 15 locations in Dublin 8. So the project has environmental benefits, it increases biodiversity and supports pollination and all of the other benefits that kind of bees bring to the environment. And it also provides training and employment opportunities for the local community. And in addition, there's a free place on our 10-week Beekeeping for Beginners course for all of the hive hosts. So we have, I think I've lost track, I think it's about 15 organizations and individuals with suitable roof space or gardens are hosting hives for us. And once restrictions lift this year, we'll be delivering that course, and we've delivered that course every year for the last few years as well. So again, it's like a fun environmental project in itself, while also creating a fluency around environmental issues and a confidence in attendees to actually engage in beekeeping. And this year we've been really lucky to get support from the Digital Hub and Smart D8 and Tyndall Laboratories to develop tiny little sensors that the bees can actually wear. And these sensors will monitor air quality, pollination pathways, pathogens, and all of the other kind of environmental metrics that are important. It's going to take several months for Tyndall to actually develop the sensors, but in the meantime, we have sensors on each of our hives to track more basic data, and all of that will be available on the new website, which we're developing at the moment, www.b8.ie, which should be live in the next couple of weeks. So I guess to sum up, for Robert Emmet CDP and for myself, reaching the point where the Liberties or the larger Dublin 8 area has an equitable and healthy provision of green resources and green space is a journey with a very long arc. And it's great to see what's, community-led initiatives that Mary and Julie are delivering in Turvey Park, and to hear about stuff that's happening elsewhere, because it's an end point that can only be achieved when the local community are driving the process. So thanks for inviting me to speak. Delighted to listen to Debbie, Mary and Julie and see what they're doing, and delighted to be a part of the Mapping Dublin project. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Austin. It's wonderful to round off hearing all these, so many different amazing things happening. And I think we all love hearing about the bees. So thank you so much. So wonderful. I'm going to move us on because we've still got a lot more we want to share. We want to go from hearing about the local projects to getting a bit more familiar with the project, how you can engage, and hearing other voices too. So thanks, Austin. I'll just move on to our next section of the event. So let me find another member of the team here who's going to be leading on the next section. Let's just see if I can find you on my screen, or maybe I'll do it a different way. Here we are. Okay, so yes, so I'm just going to bring up Alma Clavin. So Alma is a researcher at UCD School of Geography and was the lead researcher for the Mapping Green Dublin project. So I think you're very much the right person we need, Alma, to take us through the next section and let us know a bit more about the project and how we can engage.
Okay, thanks very much, Ali. So I've just been looking at the chat, and I know some of you are interested in maybe getting a PDF of Niamh's presentation. I know some of you are interested in our maps and our mapping techniques, and also perhaps contacting some of our speakers. So hopefully you can see our website here. This is mappinggreendublin.com. So one of the key outputs from this project is our greening strategy. But of course, that's not the only output. And in a way, the process was just as important. So I'm just going to go through that and some of the other outputs here. So what we have here are the 3 stages of the project. The tree mapping stage, mainly carried out in UCD Geography, as we heard earlier. If you want more information on the tree data, it is here. If you want more information on tree species, it is in this tab. So stage 2 of the project was the co-creation stage, as carried out by Common Ground and Shodin O'Sullivan and Connect the Dots and ourselves at UCD. So what we have here is a much more deeper and detailed documentation of the project, including a distillation of all of our community recommendations. So the greening strategy itself, which I'll point you towards a little bit later, doesn't have the entire set of community recommendations because there were so many, but you can find all of the community recommendations here. We also have a section on mapping the hyperlocal, which of course became increasingly important over the last year, and this work was carried out by Shodin O'Sullivan. So the 3rd stage is the action stage, and arguably the most important stage. We have details here of the Greening Forum, and you've heard Mary and Julie's story. But there are, of course, 8 or 9 other projects. Some of them are very active. Some of them have yet to come to fruition, but we would like to see them in the future. So, for example, these are all listed here. What we also have here is an entire set of our policy practitioner recommendations, which you might like to have a look at. There is a summary of them in our final output, the greening strategy, but the entire set is detailed here. So importantly, the outputs and resources section has all of our outputs, a good few of the presentations that we've carried out to date. So as part of the dissemination phase, we've talked to a number of groups and organizations, mostly on Zoom, of course, and some of them are here. So here we have the community greening strategy itself, which we are officially launching today. We have the urban prototyping toolkit, which details the workshop that was carried out last August, and Mary spoke about that a little bit earlier. So we had the members of our Greening Forum come to the Golden Bridge Cemetery, and we had a half day where we worked with them and some technical experts from the area in trying to bring their ideas to fruition and refining their greening ideas going forward. And this one may be of interest to other groups and organizations who are getting together and coming up with some greening ideas. Here we have Siobhan O'Sullivan's plots tool, and as we've all realized, everybody globally has realized over the last year, that space closest into our homes is very important for our mental health and well-being. And of course, empirical evidence shows that the green space within 300 meters of your home has most impact on your mental health, and the trees, believe it or not, in 100 meters of your home has a very big impact on mental health. So Siobhan's plots tool to examine the microgeography around your home is available there. We also have a really nice project carried out by Ronan Foley and Siobhan O'Sullivan. It's the Campbell Go Along project. It's a GIS project, and they have created a very nice digital journey along the canal, and that was in direct response to issues of access to the Campbell and associated nature connectedness in the area, and hopefully or well, I know that has been improved somewhat as a result of the work done in Turvey Park. If you want to contact us, it's mappinggreendublin@gmail.com. If you want details, the details of any of the speakers today, we can pass those on to you as well if you wish. And of course, our Twitter handle @Dublin Greening for those of you who don't already know. Okay, I'm going to stop there and move on to the next part of the launch, which is to introduce our guest speaker. Seems a little bit strange because I've never met Anja, but I will introduce you in any case. So Anja Murray is an ecologist, environmental policy analyst, nature enthusiast, and presenter on Ecoeye and Nature File, that's Lyric FM. She's also a resident of Dublin 8, which is a complete coincidence and great. And she has a keen interest in urban greening and the impact that street trees can have on living environments. Okay, so welcome, Anja. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Great, thank you very much, Alma. This is really wonderful. I haven't been part of this project. The first that I knew about it was when Niamh and Naomi from Connect the Dots, and Niamh, who we heard from earlier, contacted me about the project and perhaps speaking at the launch, and I said that I do actually live in Dublin 8. And it's really amazing to see that this project is not just about mapping, it's not just about finding out what we have and collecting that data, but it's about community input to what we need. And I'm really delighted to hear about the looking at the opportunities and the strengths and the details of what could be done, what we need in Dublin 8. From my own perspective, I'm from the country. I absolutely love nature. I'm an ecologist. I study nature. All of my work, whether it's television or radio or policy work, is about nature conservation. So with Ecoeye, we go around filming. With Nature File, I write scripts about nature and the importance of nature in our lives, and how relevant that is to so many aspects of our world, really. How do I say that in one sentence? But anyway, and then living in Dublin 8, there is a contradiction there, because I haven't heard anybody say it here, and maybe we could verify, but I have heard that Dublin 8 has one of the lowest covers of green spaces in Ireland, in Dublin City. So we're really deprived of green spaces. Now there's a couple of nice trees on the street where I live. There's a school across the way which has a garden. I can't access it, but there are trees. And like coming into my study now, there's that lovely dappled light that Alma referred to. Having trees within 100 meters of your home is really crucial for your mental health. And I love how Debbie touched on that, the very first-hand experience of having nature, having trees, having her dad showing her the different names of trees and types of trees. And it takes that, it actually takes that somebody special, like what it sounded like Debbie's dad was, to connect young people with nature, because at the moment we have absolutely no fluency with nature, and that's a generalization, but I mean, most people don't know a reed from a rush, or an oak from a cherry, from a sycamore. Like we don't even know the basic native trees in Ireland. There's very little fluency, and that comes from having very little access to nature. I live in Dublin 8, as I said. I'm quite privileged in that I get to travel a lot to amazing bogs and wetlands and countryside places and gorgeous scenery all over Ireland with my work. So I engage regularly with nature. But that shouldn't be a privilege. We should have that on hand, and it shouldn't be a local green space where there's, you know, pesticide, weed killers sprayed around every tree, and predominantly concrete. There's just so much concrete. And the importance, which has been touched on, of mental health. I'm working on a documentary at the moment, so I've spent today actually completely immersed in why nature is so important for our mental health. And it's really at the heart of our physical well-being as well as our mental well-being. We have an innate drive to connect with nature, and we've evolved our vision, the ability to see green. We're a product of biological evolution. We still have hunter-gatherer brains, and we need the sights and sounds of nature and the experience of being in nature. And there's so much research in this area. Just in the last 10 years, it's a convergence of discoveries in genetics, in neuroscience, in neuropsychology, paleobiology. There's so many different fields that are all coming up with similar conclusions, and that is that we absolutely need time in nature, immersive time in nature regularly for our mental health and well-being. And that's in a therapeutic context, if somebody is recovering from a physical illness or a mental illness, but also in an everyday sense. There's really massively therapeutic benefits to nature. We're predisposed to feel more relaxed in nature, and that has massive implications for a lot of Dublin 8. As we've heard, are built up areas. People live in apartments and don't have very much access to nature. There's other findings that just 15 to 20 minutes a day spent in nature, connecting with nature through the senses of sight, hearing, like we heard the birds in Turvey Park, smell and touch, is found to significantly lower blood pressure, pulse rate, and cortisol, that's stress hormone levels. Time in nature has been found to reduce feelings of isolation, promote calm, and lift the mood of patients in mental health units. I've got so much interesting research about this. So I mean, scientifically, we can't dispute that anymore. And then there's another aspect to that which is really interesting, and it's about biodiversity. So the greater the diversity of those natural environments that we spend time in, the greater the positive impact on our physical and mental health. So it's not just let's say a patch of monoculture green grass with a few sycamore trees. There's actually species richness of plants and animals has a positive association with the mental health and well-being. So that is really crucial to me. And there's the bigger picture of biodiversity globally and in Ireland declining at an unprecedented rate, and that's something we really have to combat. So strategies like this are really, really crucial, not just for ourselves and our own mental health and well-being, but globally and in Ireland for the biodiversity. I remember a presentation at a conference I was at recently by a very eminent scientist who came over from the UK, and she had been looking at pollinators, and she found a massive connection, a correlation between the allotments in particular and the diversity of pollinators in urban environments. And then we know there's lots about allotments and our mental health as well, and having your hands in the soil and seeing things grow. Again, Debbie talked about the excitement of just having a few tomatoes in your windowsill, and Mary and Julie, and being able to pick the lavender and smell the lavender. And there's so many really crucial connections. So I'm delighted to see this, particularly in Dublin 8, where we have such a low level of green spaces. And I also am really impressed that this project isn't just a bunch of academics coming in and mapping something and then having a nice big policy thing that sits on somebody's shelf forevermore. I love that that's only one element of the project, and that the really big element is the participation, the co-creation, and then the rollout, so that there is a neighbourhood greening forum is really, really fantastic. Yeah, I don't know if there's much more that I can say. Climate, massive. We've heard about climate and carbon capture. And for me, it's not the direct result of having a couple of trees and the amount of carbon dioxide that they might sequester out of the atmosphere. It's not the direct physical impact of having those trees. It's the crisis that we're in, the ecological, the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis, that has really come about because our values are just all gone wrong, haywire, because we're so disconnected from nature, because so many of us live in urban environments with very little access to green spaces and to nature. And we don't really notice the changes that happen in spring or the changes that happen in autumn. We don't, have good enough water quality in our streams and rivers that we can see the 20 different types of dragonflies or damselflies and the amazing colors on those insects, swifts. I've got lots of swifts here in Dublin 8. The variety of bird life, like it's not just that there's a couple of crows or a couple of swallows, it's the variety that really adds that texture to our lives. And when we don't have that in an urban environment, we're completely disconnected from nature, and we're disconnected from hearing about the biodiversity crisis. We're disconnected from the impacts of climate change. So it's more than just the direct physical impact of having those green spaces. It's the need for us as humans to understand and love nature, to reconnect with nature that's around us. And it shouldn't have to be that we get in a car and drive somewhere to access those green spaces. So I really think that it's so important, not just for us and for our mental health, but for the future well-being of the whole entire planet, that we connect with nature and we get more familiar, and we all have the opportunity to fall in love with nature again. And that's particularly important in an urban environment. So yeah, I really hope that the action element of this project is successful, and that there is funding, that it can continue, and it can continue to foster that community engagement and that participation, which is everything really. So thanks very much for inviting me. I'm really delighted to hear all about this and get involved.
Wow, thank you, Anja. Thank you for sharing your deep passion for the environment, for nature, your love of it. And it really reminded me of mine, and that how essential it is that we are able to be in the natural environment. It was just, I think that's a reminder we could all do with, for sure. So thank you for being here. And I'm just going to sort of, just a note to everyone at this stage in our launch. Now our plan was we were going to be finishing in 5 minutes time, but we wanted to kind of actually keep the room open and chat a little bit more until 7:30 for those who would like. And I would like to suggest, we also wanted to give you the opportunity for some questions to Anja and to other members and leaders on the team. So I'd like to suggest that we still do that. And if you need to leave at 7:15, I completely understand. And thank you so much for being with us. But for those who can stay, let's carry on a little bit longer. We'll maybe aim to sort of start wrapping up at 25 past. And Anja, if I could invite up some other colleagues up into the panel here, and then I'll open it out to everyone. So, so we have Anja with us after the incredible speech. I'm going to now bring up Siobhan Gagan. So Siobhan is the director of Common Ground. So you've heard of as one of the partners in Mapping Green Dublin, incredible arts organisation in Dublin 8. And then inviting up Shodine O'Sullivan. So Shodine was the lead artist on the project, and she's been heard of her many times already, and it'd be great to hear your voice, Shodine, in the panel as well. And then Gerald. So Gerald, you met already, obviously Associate Professor at UCD School of Geography. So back up into the panel, Gerald, and Alma. So just inviting you back up here as well, Alma, as our lead researcher on the project. So I think that's everyone, and I'll just, I guess now just to say to everyone who's still gathered with us, we just wanted to give you an opportunity to just see if there's anything you would like to raise or to ask, and maybe just to kind of set the scene of this is to say, as you'll have heard tonight, there's a number of different local projects, things that have been going on. You might know of things that have been happening in your local area, but our real wish here is that this work kind of really expands, and that we look towards the future, and that this kind of way of working could be going right across Dublin, right across the country or other countries. So if you could, join with us in that reflection. How could we get this to expand? What is the way that we could look forward to the future? And what's coming up for you around that? Are there questions, remarks you'd like to make, things you would like to put to the panel gathered with us for these last remaining 10 minutes? So just a reminder, you can click on the reactions button and click on the raise hand button that's there. And it's under more options on a phone or a tablet. Or if you prefer not to speak, do put something in the chat, but it would be lovely to hear a few voices. So yeah, just putting it out to you, those who are gathered. Anything you'd like to raise, ask, say at this point? Wonderful. So we've got Katie Smirnova. Katie, would you like to turn on your camera? To say it's up to you, and also I'll maybe bring you up here. Well, I can't bring you up if you're not on camera, but I will ask you to unmute. And Katie, it'd be great to hear from you. Oh, great,
Sorry.
there you are.
Is my camera on there now?
Yes, it is. Over to you, Katie.
I was wondering, is there any kind of talk of expanding this?
So that's our surprise. And Mary,
We hope you'll all join us here in Turvey, because it's all about kicking back, relaxing after the tough year and a half we've just had. It's time to have a bit of fun now. So plenty of space, as I said already, to bring down your picnic blanket, your food, enjoy all the lovely sensory everything here, and the lovely amenity, natural amenity of the Campbell, which is so peaceful.
Gardening rocks.
Gardening rocks.
Yeah, gardening's infectious.
Right.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
So, bye-bye.
I think that's a good note to end on. Gardening rocks. We have officially launched the incredible work of the Mapping Green Dublin project. And on behalf of us all the leaders, the whole team and so on, we'd like to say thank you so much to all of you for coming here and honouring this launch, for making it such a vibrant experience and engaged conversation. And this is just the start of so much more that's going to be happening. Please stay connected to us. Neve's been sharing in the different links, and so have I. But for tonight, I think I should say that we'll bring this to a close. Say thank you very, very much to all of you, and good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.